Hey warriors, if you carry these traits, you're not just intelligent, you're dangerous in the most disciplined way possible. Most people spend their entire lives trying to look smart. They hoard information, they memorize quotes, they talk fast, talk loud, talk endlessly. They throw opinions into every conversation like confetti and call it confidence. But Machiavelli never defined intelligence by noise. He defined it by control. Control over yourself when you're provoked. Control over situations when everyone else is confused. Control over outcomes when the environment is emotional, impulsive, and blind. Because real intelligence has never been about how much you know. It's about what you can do with what you know, without announcing it, without begging for validation, and without exposing your next move. Most people confuse intelligence with knowledge. Machiavelli measured it by self-command, situational awareness, and outcome dominance. And here's the brutal truth most people never accept. The world does not reward the smartest person on paper. It rewards the person who understands people, who reads power, who moves with timing. The world rewards the individual who stays calm while others panic, who sees patterns while others chase drama, who holds their tongue while others sell their dignity for a few seconds of attention. These are not academic traits, they are real-world intelligence traits, the kind that allow you to see beneath behavior, read intention, and move strategically while everyone else reacts emotionally. So if you've ever felt different, if your mind doesn't operate like most people's, if you notice shifts others miss, if you sense tension in a room before a single word is spoken, this video is for you. Because the smartest person in the room rarely announces it. They don't need to. They let others underestimate them. They let others reveal themselves. They let others make noise while they quietly collect leverage. As we move through these 7 traits, keep score, because more often than not, the quietest presence carries the sharpest mind. And don't treat this as entertainment, treat it as a mirror. If you recognize yourself in these traits, it means you weren't built for the average path. You were built for strategy. You were built to win without begging. You were built to move like someone who understands the game, instead of complaining about it. These are the 7 traits that separate the smartest from the loudest. Before we go deeper, place this affirmation in the comments. I move with control. Now let's begin with the trait that unsettles loud people the most. Trait number 1, strategic silence. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is positioning. Most people speak to prove they belong. They rush to fill every pause with jokes, opinions, stories, explanations, not because they have something valuable to say, but because they fear what happens when they stop talking. They fear losing attention. They fear being judged. They fear being unseen. They fear not existing in the room. But if you possess this trait, you don't fear silence. You understand something most people never learn. Attention is currency. And you don't spend it like a broke gambler chasing dopamine. You spend it like an investor, deliberately, selectively, only when the return is worth it. That is strategic silence. It is not shyness. It is not introversion. It is not weakness. It is the discipline of knowing that every word you speak reveals 3 things: what you want, what you fear, and what you're likely to do next. So when the moment isn't right, you don't leak information. You don't expose emotion. You don't explain yourself just to feel included. You wait. And while you wait, something powerful happens. Other people start talking for you. They explain themselves. They overshare. They justify. They defend. They attempt to impress. They try to win approval. They try to pull you into their frame. And if you're intelligent, you don't interrupt that process. Because people always reveal who they are when they feel safe enough to speak without resistance. They reveal their ego when they aren't challenged. They reveal their intentions when you don't argue back. They reveal their weaknesses when they believe they're in control. Silence gives them that illusion, so you let them have it. You allow them to speak long enough to expose their priorities, long enough to display their insecurities, long enough to show the gap between who they claim to be and what they actually value. This is how power is gathered without aggression.
This is how intelligence operates without friction. A silent mind observes patterns. A noisy mind reacts to stimuli. When you speak less, you notice more. Tone changes, body language shifts, contradictions surface, motives leak. The loud person thinks dominance comes from volume. The intelligent person knows dominance comes from control of reaction. Strategic silence forces others to reveal their hand first. It makes people uncomfortable, not because you're threatening, but because you're unreadable, and unreadable people control the frame. This is why silence unsettles insecure minds. They don't know where they stand with you. They don't know how to impress you. They don't know how to manipulate you. So they talk more. They give more away. They lose leverage while trying to gain validation. And you gain information without asking a single question. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew that power is not seized through constant expression, but through restraint, that those who speak the least often understand the most, that patience creates advantage long before action does. Strategic silence is not passive, it is active observation. It is choosing to let the room expose itself before you commit energy. It is letting emotions settle while others exhaust theirs. It is staying internally still while chaos does the revealing for you. If you resonate with this trait, understand this: you are not behind, you are not overlooked, you are not slow, you are positioned, and those who mistake your silence for weakness usually learn too late that it was calculation. Strategic silence doesn't just affect what you say, it transforms your presence. When you resist the urge to respond immediately, people begin observing you. They measure you. They wonder what's going on behind your eyes. They start to calculate your moves because you've become unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. Think about it. The person who talks non-stop, easy to read, easy to manipulate, easy to anticipate, every word they utter leaves a trail. But the person who listens first, the person who lets the room unfold, that person carries weight. That presence feels sharper, heavier, more capable, more discerning. That person sees more than they speak, and people instinctively sense it. You're not using conversation as a stage, you're using it as a scanning mechanism. Every sentence is data, every hesitation is a clue. Every tone, every emphasis, every pause tells you more than the words themselves. You notice who's trying to dominate, who's attempting to please, who's provoking, who's angling for status. You notice the patterns in what they emphasize, what they avoid, what they repeat when they think it's working. Only after the data is collected do you speak. And when you finally do speak, your words carry precision. You ask one pointed question that forces clarity. You make one calm, decisive statement that resets the room. You drop one sentence that shifts the direction of the conversation. Strategic silence transforms your voice from a habit into a weapon. Every word matters. Every pause carries weight. This is intelligence in motion. But here's the part most people overlook. This trait isn't only social, it's deeply personal. Strategic silence means you can hold yourself back from impulse. You don't send that angry text. You don't snap in the moment. You don't reveal your plans prematurely. You don't engage with people trying to drag you down to their level. You let time do the work. You let patience build leverage. You allow people to reveal exactly where they stand, and then, only then, do you act. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I speak with purpose. Trait number 2, reading real motives. This is where most people fall prey. They listen to words instead of reading purpose. The average mind treats conversations like literal transactions. You said this, so it must mean that. They assume people operate with clean intentions, clear logic, and honest delivery.
Sounds reasonable, right? It's also exactly how people get manipulated, cornered, or used without ever noticing. If you have this trait, you don't stop at words. You look for the force behind the words, the motive driving them. Because motives do not live in speeches, they live in behavior, especially behavior under pressure. Anyone can sound loyal when everything is calm. Anyone can appear supportive when it costs nothing. Anyone can seem reasonable when there's no risk. But when their interest conflicts with their image, the real person appears. You don't just ask, what did they say? You ask, what are they trying to get? Awareness, not paranoia, is the key. You notice patterns. Who only shows up when they need something? Who becomes friendly right before making a request? Who praises publicly but undermines privately? Who constantly excuses themselves but avoids accountability? Who changes their story depending on the audience? This is not cynicism. This is intelligence. Once you can read motives, you stop being emotionally hijacked by appearances, flattery, urgency, or guilt. You stop reacting to tone and start analyzing intent.
Here's the unsettling truth. Most people aren't even lying consciously. They're lying to themselves first. They don't admit, I want control. They say, I'm just helping. They don't admit jealousy. They say, I'm honest. They don't admit desire for attention. They claim, no one appreciates me. But your mind doesn't get hypnotized by the story or the packaging. You see past the narrative. You see the payoff. What they gain if you comply. What they lose if you refuse. What shifts if you don't respond as expected. This is why this skill feels like a sixth sense. It's not magic. It's pattern recognition in human behavior. Machiavelli wrote, men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand. Everyone can see and few can feel. This matters because it exposes a hard reality. People reveal their intentions more in action and behavior than in words. Those who can read these cues, those who understand the motives behind statements, don't just survive, they dominate quietly. People often make judgments based on appearances rather than reality. They are seduced by charm, confidence, flashy titles, style, and the loudest voice in the room. They mistake the surface for reliability and confuse boldness for honesty. You don't. You understand that the smoothest talker, the one who captivates the room effortlessly, may also be the most dangerous, because they know how to sell a version of themselves that serves their agenda. And if you cannot see the motive behind the words, you risk becoming a piece in their plan without ever realizing it. This is why you develop a different way of listening. You listen not just for what's said, but for what's missing. You notice what they never answer directly. You track how quickly they shift blame. You catch the subtle signs when someone dodges specifics but keeps repeating emotional lines that are designed to manipulate perception. You notice when they try to rush you into a decision, because speed is a classic tactic in pressure dynamics. Pressure first, clarity later. And instead of confronting every discrepancy immediately, you collect the data. You let time reveal the truth. Because people can fake words for a long time, but they cannot fake consistent behavior forever. This trait also makes you exceptionally calm in conflict. When someone gets dramatic, you don't automatically feel threatened. You ask, what is this emotion trying to control? When someone grows cold, you don't beg for warmth. You ask, what are they withholding and why now? When someone acts overly generous, you don't instantly feel grateful. You ask, what debt or obligation are they attempting to create? This is how you protect your mind, not through hostility, not through cynicism, but by being fully awake and aware. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I see intentions. Trait number 3, curiosity as a weapon. Some people are curious because they are bored. They ask random questions, chase trivia, or collect information to feel temporarily smart. If you have this trait, your curiosity is intentional. It has direction.
It has teeth. It is hunting for clarity, for insight, for the underlying truth, not for small talk or ego validation. You do not ask questions to sound intelligent. You ask questions to gain leverage, and clarity is power. Most people live on the surface of life. They accept the first explanation. They follow rules blindly. They move through jobs, relationships, and systems without pausing to examine the structure beneath. You cannot live like that. Your mind naturally digs deeper. It wants to see the system behind the system. You investigate incentives. You track outcomes. You map cause and effect. You study the invisible threads that control human behavior. You notice patterns, that a policy isn't designed for safety, it's designed for control. That a social trend isn't organic, it's engineered. That a rule exists not because it's fair, but because someone benefits when everyone else follows it. Once your mind works this way, you are no longer easy to manage, because you see most situations are deliberately designed by culture, ambition, fear, habit, ego, and money. You start asking the hard questions. Who wins if this continues? Who loses if it changes? Who profits, gets praised, or gains protection from the current setup? What would happen if people stopped cooperating? This is curiosity as a weapon, a curiosity that exposes the real game behind every facade.
And the reason this is a mark of intelligence is simple. The person who understands the system can operate inside it without being trapped. Most people try harder. You try smarter. You don't rely on effort alone. You rely on leverage. You look for pressure points, subtle adjustments that yield disproportionate results. You observe why certain people always win with minimal struggle. You analyze why some rise faster than others. You identify what generates authority, even when it is undeserved. You don't obsess over success stories. You obsess over mechanisms. Because once you understand the mechanisms, you can replicate the results at will. This trait manifests in daily life, too. You don't take advice blindly. You want to understand the logic behind it. You don't follow someone just because they exude confidence. You investigate what shaped that confidence. You don't accept labels like good or bad without asking what standard is being applied and who created it. Curiosity becomes your lens. It is not random. It is strategic. It gives you clarity, foresight, and control over the unseen forces at play. Curiosity of this caliber doesn't make you annoying. It makes you dangerous because it renders you difficult to deceive. It forces people to reveal their intentions, whether they want to or not. And here's a detail most people miss. Curiosity isn't just about accumulating knowledge. It's about noticing what everyone else ignores. You observe the smallest signals. You track timing. You watch reactions. You identify patterns. You understand that the most important truths in life are rarely announced outright. They are hinted at through repetition, through what gets rewarded and what gets punished, through what people pretend to disregard while secretly pursuing it. So your approach is not just learning, it is decoding life itself, and that decoding transforms how you engage. Your questions aren't random, they're surgical. They are designed to make people pause, reveal contradictions, force honesty or self-exposure. Because the right question can achieve in seconds what hundreds of arguments never can. It can collapse illusions. It can dismantle deception. Curiosity in this sense becomes a weapon, not because you aim to harm, but because you refuse to be controlled by lies, confusion, or shallow explanations. There's another dimension to this trait. You are willing to be wrong. Most people avoid error because it challenges their identity. You prioritize accuracy over ego. When your curiosity uncovers a better truth, you discard outdated beliefs gracefully, without drama or defensiveness. This flexibility sharpens you continuously, while others remain trapped in pride. When you enter a room, you don't just hear words or observe faces. You scan structures. You map incentives. You identify flows of power. You observe what people protect, what they fear, and what they chase. This isn't overthinking. This is intelligence applied to reality. Trait number 4, you don't get bored easily.
Most people aren't tired, they're unstimulated. So they chase noise, scrolling endlessly, refreshing feeds, jumping from app to app, engaging in pointless arguments. They call it keeping busy, but it's not productivity, it's sedation. It's a way to avoid being alone with their thoughts for more than 30 seconds. If you possess this trait, you're different. You can sit with nothing happening and not feel empty. You don't panic. You don't need a crowd, a screen, or chaos to feel alive. Your mind remains active without begging the world for stimulation. This is a rare marker of high intelligence. Boredom isn't a problem of time, it's a problem of depth. Someone who gets bored quickly often lacks the ability to generate meaning independently. They need constant novelty because their mind cannot sustain focus long enough to build something meaningful. You can stay on one thought long enough to understand it, stay on one skill long enough to master it, stay in one season long enough to grow fully, and that alone places you ahead of most people. Because almost everything valuable, skill, influence, trust, and true success requires time. Those who cannot endure the slow process will never create lasting impact.
Here's the harsh reality. The world is engineered to break attention. It wants you distracted. It wants you impatient. It wants you addicted to quick hits, quick laughs, quick anger, quick pleasure, quick validation. A distracted mind is easily steered. A focused mind, not so much. You don't require constant stimulation to feel okay. You can step away, unplug, and sit in quiet. And in that quiet, you can think deeply. And when you think clearly, you make better choices than someone whose mind is crowded by emotion and noise. This trait manifests in how you handle downtime. Most people treat free time as a leak to be filled. You treat it as a training ground. Calm moments become opportunities to sharpen skills, prepare, strategically plan, clean up the overlooked details. And this connects directly to Machiavelli's philosophy. He once wrote, "Never in peaceful times stand idle." This isn't about working endlessly like a machine. It's about using time intentionally, about cultivating quiet power and discipline, even when nothing seems urgent. This trait is about understanding the real advantage of quiet seasons. When life is calm, most people underestimate the power of that pause. They see stillness as nothing happening. They see downtime as empty space. You don't. You understand that calm is preparation. It is when you build reserves. It is when you refine skills without pressure. It is when you develop strength silently so that when the storm hits, and it always does, you are ready. Most people only think when pressure arrives. They start planning too late. They begin learning when the loss is already mounting. They attempt discipline only after something important has already broken. You don't operate that way. You use the calm to become dangerous, strategic, and prepared for the moments when others are scrambling blindly. Another reason this trait marks intelligence is delayed gratification. You don't need every action to feel immediately rewarding. You can sit through repetitive, boring work today because you understand what it buys tomorrow. You repeat the same practice, the same routine, the same focus, not for fleeting satisfaction, but for lasting results. That's why you often appear calm on the outside, even when your mind is a machine of strategy on the inside. You are connecting dots, refining your next steps, seeing long-term outcomes, planning moves far beyond the immediate moment. Because you don't require constant external entertainment, you resist the pull of trivial drama. You don't chase every trend. You don't react to every headline. You don't let every person's opinion dominate your mind. You choose what deserves your attention. And that, choosing focus deliberately, is power. So if someone ever told you that you're too quiet, too serious, or too isolated, understand this.
Your ability to stay engaged without noise is not a weakness. It's a rare advantage most people never develop. Trait number 5. No need to prove your intelligence. One of the clearest signs of true intelligence is also one of the most unflashy. You don't feel the need to prove how smart you are. Because the moment you become obsessed with showing intelligence, you stop using intelligence strategically. You start performing, and performance is expensive. It drains focus. It pulls you into unnecessary battles. It tempts you to speak when silence would be stronger, argue when moving on would be wiser, correct others when letting them remain wrong costs nothing. Most people cannot resist this urge. They need to win every conversation. They crave validation. They want applause, recognition, and acknowledgement of their intelligence. Without it, they feel invisible. But if you have this trait, you don't chase validation. You understand that intelligence is a tool, not a costume. It isn't meant to be displayed for the world's applause. It is wielded silently, deliberately, and efficiently. You don't turn every moment into a debate. You don't correct every minor mistake. You don't tear down every flawed idea to prove a point. You choose your battles like a strategist, not someone performing for attention. And this is what makes you dangerous. Your energy is preserved for what truly matters. Inside your mind, here's what's happening. You value outcomes over applause. You are not trying to look smart. You are trying to win correctly.
Allowing a loud person to take the spotlight while you quietly secure the leverage? Letting someone believe they're in control while you guide the direction? Letting a conversation end without closure because closure isn't always the true prize. This trait is deeply Machiavellian. Ego is a trap. It makes people predictable. It makes them reactive. It makes them easy to manipulate. When someone is obsessed with proving themselves, you can control them with one insult, one challenge, one public disagreement. They'll fight just to protect their image. They'll reveal their insecurities. They'll lose position. You, however, don't give people that access. You don't respond to every provocation. You don't let every slight become your problem. You don't take every disagreement personally. You can separate your identity from the moment. You operate independently of ego. You act strategically, not emotionally. And that is what sets you apart. This ability to separate yourself emotionally is a true mark of intelligence. When you are not hooked by immediate emotions, you can see the entire map of a situation. You can spot the hidden objectives behind conflict, the real stakes beyond the noise. You can recognize when someone is attempting to draw you into a trap, a situation where the actual aim is control, not truth. And then you step back. You ask yourself, what happens if I don't respond? What happens if I let this pass? What do I gain by staying calm? What do I lose if I react impulsively? Most people never ask these questions. They simply react. They defend. They perform under the guise of standing up for themselves. But in reality, it's ego scrambling to survive. You don't confuse noise for strength. You understand that the strongest person isn't the one who wins every argument. The strongest person is the one who can walk away from battles that don't matter. That doesn't mean you're passive. It means you are selective. When you speak, it's because it matters. When you step in, it's because it alters the outcome. When you correct someone, it's because there's a real consequence, not because your pride cannot tolerate an error floating in the air. People notice this. They may not articulate it, but they feel it. They sense that you're not chasing approval. They sense that you're not desperate to impress. They sense that your calm presence carries weight, unlike desperation, which floats, begs, and signals weakness. This trait also shields you from one of the most destructive habits of intelligence, over-explaining.
Those desperate to prove themselves justify every point, give long-winded explanations, add unnecessary words to defend what didn't need defending. In doing so, they often reveal doubt, weakness, or hidden emotions. You don't. You make your point cleanly and decisively, or you let the moment pass. A strong mind doesn't shout for recognition. It builds quietly, moves quietly, and wins quietly. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I don't perform. Trait number 6. You can make people think it was their idea. This trait is pure strategy. Its power lies in influence without friction. Most people try to persuade by pushing, pressure, lecturing, insisting, over-explaining. But when you push, the natural reaction is resistance. Even the best ideas are rejected if the ego feels threatened. Nobody likes feeling controlled. If you have this trait, you don't push, you shape. You understand that people rarely oppose the idea itself. They oppose the feeling of being handled. So instead of forcing agreement, you guide them. You help them arrive at conclusions in a way that feels self-discovered, as though it came from their own thinking, their own values, their own choices. And this is why it's so powerful. Once someone believes an idea is theirs, they defend it passionately, protect it as part of their identity, and invest in its success. You don't argue. You don't try to win. You don't turn interaction into a battle. Instead, you steer the frame. You do it with questions that narrow paths without forcing direction. Questions that quietly eliminate weak options and highlight the strong one.
Questions that prompt the other person to say the solution out loud, making it real to them. And the smartest part? You don't rush. You let the other person move at a pace that feels safe, giving them the space to connect the dots themselves. When people arrive at conclusions on their own, they trust the outcome more. They stop feeling like they're obeying you. They start feeling like they're leading themselves. This trait also means you are masterful at emotional timing. You can read what someone needs emotionally before they are ready to accept logic. Some people need respect before they can listen. Some need certainty before they can commit. Some need to feel in control before they can cooperate. You don't deliver the same message to everyone. You adjust your delivery, aligning it with the emotional state of the person without altering the core truth. Because persuasion isn't just about facts, it's about timing, tone, and the doorway you choose. This is why you often win without making enemies. You don't humiliate people to get agreement. You don't corner them. You don't force them to admit mistakes in front of others. Instead, you give them a path to move toward the right decision while saving face. And saving face is not kindness, it's leverage. A person who feels respected is easier to align with. A person who feels exposed becomes unpredictable. Machiavelli once said, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few really know what you are." That principle applies perfectly here. The person you influence should feel that they are choosing freely. They should see themselves as the author of the decision. Your guidance remains invisible, not because you're being fake, but because visible control creates resistance. You work with human nature instead of against it. People don't like commands, but they love choices. They don't like being corrected, but they love being consulted. They don't like being forced, but they love feeling understood. This is why you use framing. You don't say, "Do this." You ask, which option gets you the outcome you want? You don't say, "You're wrong." You ask, what would make this true in reality? You don't say, "My way is better." You say, "If we try it your way first, what would success look like?" Notice what happens. The other person stays in motion, but the motion is now guided. You aren't battling their ego. You give their ego a seat at the table while you quietly drive the car. When done well, this doesn't just change decisions, it changes behavior.
People follow what they feel they chose themselves. They commit harder. They defend the plan. They take responsibility. They stop needing constant supervision. This is real influence, not domination, not shouting, not control through fear, control through alignment. The best influence doesn't argue, it redirects. Trait number 7. You don't react, you calculate. This trait separates the sharp from the reckless. You don't react, you calculate. Reactions are automatic. Calculations are deliberate choices. Most people live like open buttons. Press the right one and they explode. Trigger the right insecurity and they defend. Touch the right pride and they overcompensate, proving themselves. Once you can predict triggers, you can guide behavior, because predictable behavior is leverage. If you have this trait, you are not easy to trigger. Not because you lack emotion, you feel deeply, but you don't let emotion drive your decisions. You treat emotion like a signal, not a steering wheel. When someone provokes you, you don't match their energy instantly. You don't mirror disrespect. You don't reply in heat. You pause. You breathe. You view the moment like a chessboard, not a street fight. And that pause changes everything. It gives you options. Most people don't want options. They want release. They want the instant win, even if it costs them the week, the month, or the relationship. You don't live for the moment. You live for the outcome. So you ask yourself questions that most people never consider in real time. What is the cost of responding immediately? What do I gain if I remain calm?
What is the real goal here? Truth, control, attention, or ego? These questions turn chaos into clarity, and clarity is power. This trait also defines how you handle disrespect. You don't mistake rudeness for danger. You don't confuse noise with authority. You don't treat every insult like an emergency. You measure the situation. Is this person truly a threat or just loud? Is this conflict important or purely emotional? Is this about principle or pride? Then you respond in a way that protects your position. Sometimes your response is direct. Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes humor. Sometimes distance. Sometimes a firm boundary. Sometimes it is walking away entirely. The key, your response is never automatic. It is chosen. That is why people cannot control you easily. They cannot predict your next move. And unpredictability, when guided by discipline, is terrifying to impulsive people. This completes the 7 traits that separate the smartest from the loudest, the strategic from the reactive, and the dangerous from the ordinary. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I move with control, strategy, and purpose. They want you to react. They want you to snap so they can label you. They want you to be emotional so they can justify their behavior. They want you caught in the moment because emotional people can be controlled, influenced, and manipulated. But you refuse. You remain calm. And that calm, subtle, unshakable, deliberate, forces others to reveal themselves. It makes them carry the weight of their own behavior without your help. Their drama no longer lands. Their manipulation fails. Their attempts to derail you crumble. And the longer you hold that control, the more authority you accumulate without ever asking for it. Because self-control is the ultimate signal of strength. It tells everyone around you, I am not ruled by the chaos of the room. I am ruled by strategy, by intention, by clarity. This trait also makes you extraordinarily strategic in decision-making. You don't act under pressure. You don't commit because someone else is rushing you. You don't make agreements out of fear of missing out. Instead, you slow the moment down. You measure every consequence. You ask yourself, if I do this,
What happens next? If I say yes, which doors open and which doors close? If I walk away, what power do I retain? Most people never think this far ahead. They treat decisions like impulses and are shocked when outcomes backfire. You calculate because you understand something deceptively simple. The price of impulsiveness is always paid later. You understand timing. You know the same words said at different moments can produce completely different outcomes. You know that patience is not weakness, it is leverage. You know that withholding a response is often stronger than any reply. And when you finally act, you act with precision. No hesitation, no second guessing, no emotional overflow. Just clarity, direction, impact. That is why